don't even think about suggesting we ditch our plans one more time. We secured these Elton John tickets ages ago." My mom shouted, her voice bouncing off the walls of my hospital room. I was sitting there, completely shocked, gripping my phone with shaky hands. It was Christmas Eve at Las Vegas Medical Center. Just me, my 2-year-old twins, Ethan and Emily, quietly playing in the corner, and a nurse named Valerie taking my vitals. The agony in my stomach was unbelievable, as if someone were repeatedly stabbing me, but the apathetic expression on my mother's face through the video call wounded me even more. "I'm Natasha Wilson. I'm 33 years old, and for my entire life, it seems I've always been a low priority within my own family. My younger sister, Jessica, the favored one, could do absolutely nothing wrong in my parents' opinion. At the same time, I couldn't even persuade them to babysit their only grandkids, while I was undergoing emergency surgery for issues connected to my husband's passing 6 months before. The physicians had discovered internal hemorrhaging that necessitated immediate treatment, but my parents' sole concern was their concert passes and celebrating Christmas Eve with Jessica. After running out of other possibilities, when I finally requested their assistance, my dad's reply was more hurtful than any scalpel. "You're seriously becoming such a pain and a hassle, Natasha. We're retired now. We have the right to enjoy ourselves without your never-ending issues." Ever since my folks opted for early retirement 3 years back, I've been their financial safety net. Each month, I made sure to wire them $2,500 to cover their home loan and other bills, even after James passed away. I did this out of a sense of commitment and affection, with the conviction that families should look out for one another. I realize now how naive that was. Valerie gave my shoulder a soft squeeze as I quietly cried, the tears landing on the hospital blanket. "Olivia, a pal of mine, works as a nanny and has a focus in handling childhood trauma. I'll get in touch with her for you," she suggested. Her caring nature stood in sharp contrast to the coldness of my parents. The little ones were simply too young to grasp the situation. They had already lost their father in the accident, and now they might lose me too if the operation didn't go well. The idea scared the heck out of me, but not as much as the idea of leaving them in the care of folks who considered them to be a drag. Right then and there, as pain ripped through me and my heart ached with disillusionment, I came to a resolution. I asked Valerie to please give her a call, and with that request, I took the first steps to severing the toxic connections to the people who brought me up, but never showed me genuine love. A flood of recollections swept over me as I put the phone down. During my younger years, I constantly felt ignored, while Jessica was always the center of attention. When I finished college with high marks, my parents hardly took notice because Jessica landed a part in a local advertisement that same weekend. When I tied the knot with James, they griped that the wedding location was too distant for them to travel. And after the birth of our twins, they only came to see them one time, asserting that the Bobbies were too irritable for their tastes. Through everything, James was a constant source of strength for me. He knew how much it hurt when family lets you down, seeing as he hadn't spoken to his own father in years. "We're going to create a new family," he'd tell me, "a family that understands how to show affection," and that's exactly what we did, establishing a loving household brimming with joy and understanding. However, a drunk driver took his life 6 months ago, leaving me to bring up our children solo while wrestling with sadness and despair. Even with the grief I felt, I kept on helping my parents financially. I even upped the amount each month after they mentioned having a hard time with rising prices. I wanted to rise above them, to demonstrate that family members should support each other no matter the situation. The contradiction was just devastating. There I was, hurting terribly on the inside, maybe even at death's door, and they couldn't even skip one concert to look after my kids. Valerie came back saying that her friend Olivia would be here in the next hour. "She's really good with children," Valerie reassured me. "She used to work with children who had experienced trauma at the hospital before she decided to become a nanny for individual families." "What's this going to set me back?" I inquired, with concern slipping into my voice. The medical expenses were already mounting because James' insurance had some limits on what it covered. "That's not something to think about right now," Valerie replied. "Let's just concentrate on getting you prepared for the operation." A sense of unease settled over me. The $2,500 I was planning to send to my folks next week kept replaying in my mind, a sum that could be put toward childcare costs instead. That notion ignited something within me, a long-dormant instinct for taking care of myself. Olivia was everything Valerie had described when she showed up. She was caring, competent, and clicked with the twins right away. As the hospital workers prepped me for the operation, I came to a conclusion. "Could you get my phone for me one more time?" I inquired of Valerie. With trembling fingers, I fired off a couple of texts. The initial one was to my bank, telling them to put a stop to all future automatic transfers to my parents' account. The other went to my parents. "I won't be giving you any more money. My kids and I should be more than an afterthought for you. Leave me alone from now on." As I was being rolled down the hall to the OR, I felt something surprising despite the pain and dread. It was liberation. The operation went well, but it made me weaker than I had expected. I was in the hospital for 5 days, mostly in a haze, so thankful for Olivia, who was so helpful, staying with the twins in my hospital room during the day and bringing them back to my place in the evenings. In one of the clearer moments I experienced, my phone's light caught my attention as it flashed with alerts. I had 27 unattended calls and lots of texts from my folks and Jessica. The majority of the messages seemed to follow a familiar sequence, starting with bewilderment, proceeding to irritation, and ending with frantic requests concerning their home loan installment. They didn't even bother to inquire about how my operation went or whether the kids were doing all right. The last text I got from my dad really spoke volumes. "You can't simply ignore us in this manner. We've got a boat trip lined up for the coming month, and the tickets can't be returned for a refund." The messages my sister sent were dissimilar. She appeared to be genuinely puzzled. "Mom and Dad only informed me that you were undergoing some small procedure." What exactly is happening? Why are they stressing about finances? It struck me that my parents hadn't been honest with Jessica about how serious my condition was, as a way of justifying their decision to go to a concert instead of being with their grandkids. I made the choice to give her the real account, even while I was still a bit out of it because of the drugs. Her answer was almost immediate. "I was completely oblivious that your surgery was an emergency, Natasha. Apparently, they had made me believe you were exaggerating a regular examination. If only I had known, I would have been there to take care of your bobbies. I'm so sorry for not being there," and I trusted her sincerity. Jessica is not a callous person at heart. She's simply been brought up in a setting that instilled in her the idea that her own requirements were paramount. Maybe finally seeing things for what they are will help her understand what her parents are really like. After I got out of the hospital, I'd come to a few conclusions. For starters, I brought Olivia on board, part-time, to lend a hand with the bobbies while I recuperated. The second thing I did was get in touch with an attorney to draw up some legal documents that would name a dear friend as the bobbies' caregiver if something were to happen to me, definitely not my folks. Next up, I put my mom and dad's numbers on the block list, letting Jessica get in touch with me every now and then as I tried to figure out if she was for real. What I decided was really going to hit me in the wallet. The $2,500 I was sending to my parents every month was basically almost 33% of what I made working as a graphic designer. If I wasn't shelling out that money anymore, I could actually swing decent daycare for the twins and maybe even begin to build back the savings I'd used up when James passed away. Lying in my own bed that evening, with the twins snoozing away in their nursery right across the hall, I was swimming in all sorts of feelings. There was that guilt, that deep-seated sensation that I was doing something bad by looking out for myself and my kids. I was scared about getting better while also trying to raise 2 little ones, but there was this new feeling too, like I was finally starting to think highly of myself. My phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. "We just had this massive blow-up, Mom and Dad and me, because of how they treated you. I'm crashing at a hotel tonight. Can we chat tomorrow?" I started to think that maybe I wasn't completely on my own in this. After my operation, about 14 days later, I was very gradually getting my energy back. The spot where they cut me open still ached something awful if I moved too fast, but honestly, I felt like I was getting a little better every day. I don't know what I would have done without Olivia showing up every morning to lend a hand with the bobbies so I could get some work done from home. My graphic design clients really surprised me. They were so understanding about me not being able to work as much, and I really appreciated having a job I could do from home so I could be with my kids. Jessica had stopped by a couple of times, bringing over some healthy food and hanging out with the twins. At first, our talks felt a little stilted, but eventually she started talking about what it was like for her growing up with our parents. One night, while we were just watching the twins playing together, she confessed that they always acted like you were the one who wanted to be apart from the family. I had no idea they were actually driving you away. I was starting to see a different side of my sister, one that had been covered up by years of my parents trying to control things. I wasn't quite ready to put all my trust in her just yet, but I was thankful for her trying. Then came the sound at the door I was almost expecting. Peeking through the little hole, I saw my parents standing out there in the hall. I noticed my mom was holding onto her fancy handbag like she was nervous, and my dad was just standing there with his arms folded, looking impatient like always. I paused, my heart racing, before I cracked the door open just enough to talk through the opening. I asked them what they wanted, and I was surprised how calm my voice sounded. My mom started in right away with, "Natasha, honey, we've been so concerned," and that sweet tone of hers immediately made me get defensive. "We were getting worried because you weren't picking up the phone, and we just had to know if you and the kids were doing okay." "Everything's fine," I responded, my voice lacking any emotion. "So, if that's it," my father cut me off, putting a little pressure against the door. "It's not," he said. "We have to talk about this absurd money problem. The bank contacted us about the mortgage payment, and we had to use the money we were saving for our cruise to pay for it." I was beyond shocked at their nerve. They didn't ask how I was recovering, didn't show any worry about their grandkids, they just wanted to talk about money. I said, "I told you guys I'm not helping you financially anymore," I said. And I wasn't kidding. "But honey," my mother begged, her voice getting higher, "we've really grown accustomed to having that money. Your father and I changed the way we lived because we thought you were going to keep helping us." "My commitment?" I repeated, not believing what I was hearing. "I've been sending you money because I felt guilty and obligated, and you couldn't even be bothered to watch your grandkids when I had emergency surgery." My father's expression turned sour. "That's not right, Natasha. We had things we wanted to do. Things that were more important than my children being safe, more important than me staying alive," I retorted, my anger starting to boil over. "Do you even know what the doctors told me? There was a possibility that I wasn't going to make it through the surgery. Did you even bother to ask?" Their lack of response was all I needed to know. "We messed up once," my mother said in a low, theatrical voice. "Is this really how you intend to treat us?" "Mom," I replied, experiencing an odd sense of tranquility, "this isn't a punishment, it's simply the consequence of your actions. I've been trying to get your approval and assistance my whole life, and when I needed you most, you decided that Elton John tickets were more important than being there for me." My father cut in, his voice taking on a demanding edge. "We are your parents, after all." And I retorted that I'm also a parent. "I could never imagine treating Ethan and Emily the way you two have treated me." "Absolutely not." At that moment, Emily waddled into the room, tightly holding her stuffed giraffe. My mother immediately changed her approach. "Here's my sweet little granddaughter," she said softly as she bent down. "Grandma has brought presents." Because she didn't know these virtual strangers well, Emily stepped back and glanced at me with a hesitant look. "I think it's time for you to go," I stated softly. "I'll be in touch when I'm ready to talk, if that ever happens." But regarding the money, my father began, I cut him off by finishing that it's no longer something you need to worry about, and then I carefully shut the door. The following morning, my parents came back with reinforcements. My Aunt Patty, my mother's sister, who had always considered herself the family mediator. "Sweetheart," Aunt Patty begged from the other side of my door, which I had kept closed, "let's try to be rational here. I answered through the door that your parents are having a hard time now, that I'm not helping them." I continued, nodding that they handled their finances for many years before I started assisting them. They opted for early retirement, fully aware that their savings were not sufficient. My mother's words interrupted my thoughts. "We made those choices because you said you would be there for us. We were forced to call off our vacation on the water, and now we stand to potentially lose our home." Now that I'd taken a step back from the cloud of guilt they had surrounded me with for years, their efforts to control me seemed so obvious. When exactly did I vow to provide for them for the rest of their lives? I remember offering some short-term assistance after they retired, but somehow that has transformed into an anticipated and never-ending arrangement. "Look, Mom, Dad, I'm still healing from a significant operation and also looking after my young kids." I stated decisively that I was done with the conversation before turning and walking away from the door, not paying attention to their ongoing knocking and begging. Later, my father sent out a mass email to all of our relatives, explaining how I had forsaken them when they needed me most, after they had given up everything for me. Their decision to not help with the twins when I had emergency surgery was conveniently left out of the email, and instead they depicted me as a thankless daughter who had suddenly shut them out for no reason. The negative response was something they hadn't seen coming. My cousin Michael, the one who lives close to my folks, replied to everyone, saying something like, "Hey Robert, didn't you just purchase a brand new boat recently? And Diana, wasn't that a new diamond bracelet you were showing off at Thanksgiving?" Other relatives joined in, and a lot of them messaged me privately wanting to know what was really going on. Even Aunt Patty gave me a call after figuring out the real story. She confessed that she hadn't been aware I'd had an operation. "I was told you were overreacting about some standard medical thing and using it to get back at them with money, that's what they told me." At the same time, Jessica, having seen how our parents were acting for herself, completely sided with me. With her help, I put together one response to the family email chain that stuck to the facts, saying plainly, "I recently had to have emergency surgery, and there was a pretty high chance things could go wrong. Because they had concert tickets, my parents wouldn't watch my kids for me. Right now, I'm concentrating on getting better and taking care of my twins without any extra stress." I was stunned by the amount of support I got after that. My cousin Michael's wife brought over meals she'd made at home. A distant relative I hardly even knew volunteered to watch the kids sometimes, and she wouldn't take any money for it. To give me a hand in recovering, Jessica started spending her weekends at my place, bonding with her niece and nephew. What really surprised me was that Valerie from the hospital got me in touch with a support group for young parents who'd lost their spouses. Because it was on Zoom, I was able to join their first gathering from my own home, and for the first time since James passed away, I felt a real connection with people who knew exactly what I was going through. As for my folks' finances, things were spiraling downward at an alarming rate. They had in fact been spending more than they earned, relying on my monthly help to keep up their habits of vacations and expensive items. Jessica found out that they had actually taken out another loan on their home the previous year in order to purchase their boat, figuring I would keep helping them with their original home loan forever. "They've been dishonest with everyone," Jessica remarked, completely stunned after she'd assisted them in going over their financial records at their request. It wasn't that they were penniless, but that they had simply overspent. They would be okay if they sold off the boat and their vacation ownership. Their voice messages and texts, which became increasingly desperate, kept coming in, but with each day that went by, their influence over me lessened. I was actually creating something new from the mess their dishonesty had caused, an authentic support system grounded in genuine caring instead of duty. A month after my operation, something really unexpected happened. My parents received an official warning that they could lose their home. Jessica phoned to let me know, and I could hear a combination of worry and frustration in her voice. She explained, "They are in a state of total panic right now. The bank is giving them 2 months to bring their payments up to date, or they will be forced out of their house." "What about the money they saved for retirement?" I inquired, gently bouncing Emily on my leg while Ethan was asleep. "Mostly gone." Jessica sighed before adding, "They used a big part of it for the boat and then put the rest into some investment opportunity that one of Dad's friends from the golf course suggested to him. They basically lost everything." "It's not that I think you're obligated to assist them, Natasha. I merely felt it was information you should have." Later that night, both my parents messaged me frantically. They completely dropped any charade of worrying about me and directly pleaded for financial assistance. My mom's message really laid things bare. "We genuinely didn't believe you'd actually sever ties with us. We figured you were just upset and that you'd resume sending funds in a week or so." The idea that they didn't take my boundaries seriously really got under my skin. After all those years of prioritizing their needs over my own and putting up with their bad behavior, it turns out they never truly respected me. At the same time, my own existence was changing in ways I never anticipated. The support group became so important to me, linking me up with other moms and dads dealing with similar issues. That's how I encountered Diana, a real estate agent whose husband had succumbed to cancer a couple of years before, leaving her with a little boy who was only 3. She aided me in looking at possibilities I hadn't even considered, such as selling my apartment, which was too cramped anyway, and leveraging the money to relocate to a less expensive area with superior choices for childcare. I had also launched a little business on the side creating tribute websites, which was inspired by the one I'd designed for James. A few of the people in my support group had ordered websites from me, and now word was getting around. For the first time since becoming a widow, I experienced a feeling of having a reason to be, something beyond just trying to make it through each day. Seeing how far I'd come and how much my parents were falling apart became even clearer when they unexpectedly showed up at my place again, this time carrying a complex breakdown of what they owed. My father told me that they needed $14,000 to get the mortgage back on track and prevent losing the house, his usual commanding voice now mixed with a sense of panic. I let them come in, not because I felt obligated, but because I was interested in hearing their side of the story now that they were really dealing with the results of their actions. I suggested asking if they'd considered selling the boat, as I motioned for them to have a seat at my small table. My father argued that they would lose money on it. "We've been trying to get rid of it, but the market isn't good," my mother quickly chimed in. I nearly chuckled at the ridiculousness of it all, considering they couldn't afford them. Those are our retirement treats, after all. My father shot back, his voice getting sharper, that they could handle it if I helped out. It's the very least I could do considering all they had done for me. I wondered aloud, what exactly have you done for me? The question just sort of lingered like a dare. At that exact moment, the twins waddled into the room, Ethan holding tight to his favorite toy truck and Emily chattering happily. My parents' faces immediately softened. "Look at our sweet little ones," my mother gushed, reaching for Emily, who quickly ducked behind my legs. I simply pointed out, "They don't even know you." I mentioned they've only seen them maybe 3 times ever. I asserted that they had made the choice to stay out of their lives. My father protested, arguing that wasn't right. "We're very busy people. I noticed you were too occupied to spend time with your grandkids, too preoccupied to support your daughter during a major operation, but somehow had enough time to ask me for cash. That pretty much sums up where your focus lies," I figured. My mom's expression shifted, and I couldn't discern if it was authentic sadness or just a calculated act. She murmured that without my assistance, they were going to be wiped out. I responded with a calm voice that I had lost my husband. My kids had lost their dad. "We made it through, you two will get through this too." A few months following my operation, my parents had to deal with what was coming. They were left with no choice but to put their house on the market to prevent it from being taken by the bank. Jessica kept me in the loop regarding what was happening with them, even though I kept my distance. They did find a small apartment to live in, a huge step down from their big house on the lake. Dad reluctantly sold his boat for less than it was worth, and they finally managed to get rid of that timeshare, but for pennies on the dollar. "They're telling everyone that you're the reason they're in this mess," Jessica mentioned to me during one of her regular visits. "It's so weird to witness. I learned they're telling anyone who will lend an ear that I deserted them after guaranteeing to take care of them forever." I told her to just let them say whatever they wanted, feeling surprisingly unaffected. What really happened will come out. And sure enough, they did. Most of my relatives really came together to support me once they knew everything that had happened. Even my aunt on my dad's side, who usually agreed with him on everything, phoned me to offer her encouragement when she realized my parents wouldn't assist me when I had my operation. At the same time, things were really looking up for me. Diana, who I knew from the support group, aided me in locating and buying a small house with 3 bedrooms in a neighborhood that was great for kids. Amazingly, what I paid for the house each month was cheaper than what I used to pay for my apartment, plus now the twins had a yard where they could play, which was a first for them. The memorial website business I had on the side had become successful enough that I was able to cut back on my graphic design jobs and dedicate myself to work that actually felt fulfilling. Olivia still watched the kids for me 3 days a week, but I had reworked my work schedule to spend as much time as I could with Ethan and Emily. But the biggest thing was, I had finally discovered a group of people that I could really connect with. When we moved into our new place, people who lived nearby brought over cooked dishes. The support group helped set up times for the children to play together. Instead of being someone who was just vying for our parents' approval, Jessica had become a real sister to me. Once in a while, even Valerie from the hospital would pop over with her kids in tow. Even though I'd lost my husband and no longer spoke to my parents, I felt less isolated than I ever had before. 6 months had passed since my operation when I got a letter, an actual handwritten letter from my mom. I almost threw it in the garbage without even opening it, but I had to know what it said. The thing inside was something completely new to me, a real apology from the heart. "I've been doing some soul-searching about how I've acted," she expressed in her letter. "Seeing you create your own world without us being involved has made me really deal with some hard truths regarding my own shortcomings as your mom. I felt envious of how self-sufficient you were and how you always bounced back. The fact that you didn't seem to rely on me like I leaned on my own mother bothered me, honestly. But I get it now, you did need me, just not in the specific ways I wanted to be needed. When you requested our help with the twins when you had surgery, you were actually asking for support, and we let you down big time. I'm really, truly sorry." The letter went on, detailing how they'd completely overhauled their financial situation. My father has started working a part-time gig at the local hardware shop. Most of their expensive possessions were sold off, and for the first time in years, they were living simply. She wasn't looking for cash or even to be forgiven. She only wanted me to recognize that she was apologizing. Jessica looked at the letter when I handed it over, and she was unconvinced. "They've been meaning to get this letter to you for several weeks now. At first, Dad was resistant, but I think he's starting to see things in a new light too, particularly after his health scare last month." "You had a heart scare?" I asked, feeling concerned despite myself. "It was nothing major, just chest discomfort and high blood pressure, but it frightened him. He's taking medication now and following the doctor's recommendations," Jessica explained. "I believe being faced with his own mortality has made him a bit more humble." I couldn't just jump right into replying to the letter. I was definitely in need of some time to sort through my emotions. Was this real regret they were expressing, or just another way to try and control me? Had something fundamental shifted in them, or were they just trying a different approach? That evening, I ended up looking through some old family pictures, something I hadn't done ever since I'd ended things with them. Looking back at those happy pictures, I started to pick up on trends that I'd never seen before. In a way, my parents had always been acting, putting on a show of being the ideal parents but really prioritizing what they wanted. A year had passed since I had my operation, and I finally gave in and agreed to meet my parents in a public place, at a low-key coffee shop close to where I was living. When they showed up, I hardly knew who they were. It seemed like my father had shrunk a little, and his usual self-assured way of carrying himself was gone, replaced by a more subdued presence. My mother wasn't wearing her fancy, high-end clothing anymore. She had on some plain, everyday clothes instead. Jessica was watching the twins for the day. A big, happy family get-together wasn't something I was ready for at that point. We all sat there feeling uncomfortable until my father did something completely out of character for him. Tears started streaming down his face. "I know I was a terrible father," he said, his voice cracking with emotion, "and an even worse grandfather. I'm not expecting you to just forgive me, but what I really want you to know is that I finally understand." Wow, we were so self-centered. My mother leaned her hand across the table, not quite making contact with mine, but moving it in my direction. "We've been spending months working through things with a therapist," she confessed. The whole thing started with Jessica, and even though we weren't initially on board, it's really changed things for the better. I didn't immediately offer them forgiveness or make commitments that would be difficult to uphold. I opted to show them photos of the twins and fill them in on what our lives were like now. Maybe for the very first time, they actually listened intently without cutting me off, and without trying to center the conversation on themselves. My father posed a gentle question as we were saying goodbye, asking if there might be a possibility, eventually, for him to get to know his grandkids. Before giving an answer, I really had to think it through. It all hinges on what you do going forward, not just what you say. We can begin with brief, supervised visits if you're truly dedicated to making a real change. But let me make this very clear. My kids will only have connections with people who treat their mother with respect. As I left that meeting, I wasn't carrying that heavy feeling of responsibility, nor that familiar, bitter anger that had characterized our dynamic for so many years. What I felt instead was a new sensation, a tranquil confidence of someone who understood her value, someone who had put up clear boundaries and wouldn't back down from them. It was still unclear if my folks could actually evolve, but I know that I myself had already gone through a metamorphosis, from a daughter anxiously seeking validation to a mother who was fiercely protective and unambiguous about what she expected.